Hi, everyone. This is Nick Craig. This is the Leading from Purpose in Challenging Times podcast. So I am home, and it's a Sunday. My wife and stepson are in the other room making lunch. And after this this session that I do, I get to vacuum clean the house. So I have new duties. So I'm sure all of you are all dealing with all these different interesting changes in the journey that we happen to be on. This session is, I think, a really powerful session now. It comes from the foundation of what we did in session one. So in session one, we focused on two key things that will help you in challenging times. Number one is that stress, there's two responses to stress. There's the fight or flight response, which is what we see a lot of these days. And then there's the challenge response, which is what we all need to step into. And purpose is a very powerful pivot to help us step into the challenge response. So hopefully that's what you've been playing with and that's what you've been doing. Now, the second thing I wanted to remind you of was that we have the crucible experiences in our lives, and the gift that they bring us is that they remind us of our deeper resilience. So telling your crucible stories or having others tell theirs right now can be incredibly powerful. So I hope you've been playing with that as well. Today, our focus is, in some ways, focus. And what does it mean? And what is the power that that brings to us in connection with purpose? So let's do a little experiment. So I'd like you to, in your chair, wherever you may be sitting or listening to this, is sit with your feet firmly on the ground. And as you put your feet firmly on the ground, I would like you to just become aware of the bottom of your feet. Now, as I just said that, notice how many sensations you're aware of that you were not aware of 2 seconds ago. If I ask you to increase the intensity of those sensations, what happens? Pretty amazing, yes? Now, why is this important? The reality is that if we look at the world that we're in right this minute, there are a limited number of things that are within our control. One of them that is within our control is where we put our focus. Now, I don't know about you, but my ability to open up the New York Times or whatever magazine or whatever it is that you use for your news or listen to the news has gone up dramatically. And with that comes the challenge, which is that becomes the focus. Now, I was just reading an article of a teacher in Wuhan as they have started to come out of their quarantine. And she said that one of her key insights for all of us was not to spend all of your time focused on the news. And what she talked about was that what she began to focus on was the sound of the birds. And what she discovered is that for the first time in many years, she actually heard them, because the noise from the traffic and everything else had made it where that was not even possible to hear. But now she had the possibility of truly hearing the birds. In some sense, the birds for us are a metaphor for hearing our purpose. Now, one of the things and the opportunities that we have is if we look at your purpose statement is a beautiful example of who you are. The access to that can be deepened in this moment by asking this very simple question. Where does my purpose come from? What is the experience in my life that my purpose comes from? And for you to actually step into that movie for a couple of minutes. And from that place, look at the current reality of how do you want to look at it? What is the view that you want to have? Purpose gives us an opportunity of having our own view of the world that we have in front of us, as opposed to the one that the news gives us. So here's my example of this. in my life, if I think of my purpose, which is to wake you up and have you be home, or as many of you like the other version, is to be the Gandalf that knocks on your door. That purpose, if I look back in my life, probably one of the most powerful moments where purpose showed up for me, and it was before I had the words, was when I was about 15 years old. We had just moved to a city in which we were living in a basement apartment overlooking a swamp. My parents' relationship was probably the worst of the 50 years they were together. I was starting in a new school in the middle of the year, and there was really nothing but misery relative to the scenarios and stories that I had in my head. And one day I rode down to, my bicycle, rode down to a bookstore. And for whatever reason, I started reading these books. And the books that I picked up happened to be one on Gandhi and his journeys and how challenging his journeys were and how he'd been put in prison and just all the things that had happened to him before he became famous. Gandhi was one, Churchill was another, and looking at how challenging his life had been between World War I and World War II. Looking at Lincoln and his early childhood. And I started reading all these stories and different people, and what I realized was that they'd been challenged in ways that I had never been challenged. But look at how incredible their impact had been. And I realized that there's a potential in each of us, and what if we really were to access it? And I actually had this real insight that that's what I wanted to do with what my gift was, or whatever it is that I was thinking of at the time. And it changed my whole relationship to how I saw the events that were happening around me. I went from being the victim to seeing the opportunity. And in some sense, as I go back and I think of that movie that I can sort of visually experience, it changes how I look at the current reality. So in some ways, the biggest gift I have for you is your own story. And my request of you is that you sit down and you jot down and think about, what is the story that really represents your purpose? What is the experience? And from that part of you, how does that help you look at the current challenges that you face and what you might do differently? That would be a beautiful expression of your purpose. That's your homework. Now, final note. This is a podcast I'm releasing this week with a colleague named Harry Hudson. Harry Hudson wrote a beautiful, beautiful book, which I have right here, called Navigating an Organizational Crisis. Perfect timing, wouldn't you say? We have a fabulous interview and dialogue. He refers to a name named Don West, who was in charge of getting the power back in New Orleans during Katrina and spending 6 months sleeping in a cot, having his house underwater as he was trying to save everyone else's house. It's a beautiful story of what it takes to lead in challenging times. So I hope you also get to listen to this beautiful podcast. So till next time, we'll see what my surroundings look like. I have to go vacuum now. And I will talk with you later. Bye.